Good evening, everybody. We're just welcoming all of our guests in at the moment, so we will get started in just a moment or two. For those of you that have been with us for the last few seasons of the Campfires, welcome. It's lovely to have you back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, then a big warm welcome to you all. I will take you through how the campfire works. I promise it's not difficult. There's no test at the end of it, but I will give you a little bit of an overview as to how we do things here, and a couple of changes that we've made to the previous way of doing things. So, in order to get us started, while we've got people joining in, you will have noticed that there is a recording sign, which is the first time that we've done this. So what we are very conscious of is that there is some amazing content that comes through with our speakers and with our guests who very kindly share. So what we have decided to do is that we are recording the main body of this. So this will be the main discussion. When we move into the Q&A at the end, then we will stop the recording so that that bit remains within the group this evening. So hopefully you're accepting of that, I should probably say, and you're okay with us doing that. Please feel free to turn your camera off if you don't. That's not a problem. We will spotlight our panelists, so you don't have to worry about being recorded eating your tea or anything like that. But that's how we are going to do things, and then the recording will make it available in the next couple of weeks, so that other people can take advantage of our panelists here this evening. You may notice a slightly different lineup this evening as well. Sadly, two of our panelists have come down with one of these dreaded bugs that's going around at the moment. It seems to be getting everybody. So we are without two of those. However, we do have Charlotte, who has very kindly stepped in to give us the VN perspective. So a huge thank you to Charlotte for stepping in at last minute to make sure that we have the VN voice represented in this group. I seem to have been tinselled by my daughter, so I'm struggling a bit here with fluff. So that's the main part. In terms of how do we operate the campfire, so for those of you who haven't been with us, we just chat. There's nothing more complicated to it than that. We let our speakers talk, share their thoughts and opinions, and the beauty of this is that the chat is open. So if you want to share anything in there, any resources, if you want to ask any questions, then please pop them through to one of us as the hosts. I can't promise we'll get to everything because we've had a lot of questions submitted in advance, but we will try and get through as many as possible this evening. If we don't get an answer to your question, what we will try to do is when we write up the resources that come up at the end of this, then we will make sure that that we can add those in where possible, so that we still get to those. And if there is something that is particularly on your mind, and you do want to reach out to somebody to talk to, then I would absolutely encourage you to speak to VetLife, but also Sam will be putting in the chat resources and other organisations that you might also feel comfortable talking with. So if hopefully we will be able to have a really good evening this evening, as the first one of our new series, and we will get started. But if there's anything that you want to ask, as I say, put it in the chat, and we will try and get to those questions as quickly as possible. So you're not here to listen to me chat along. We are here to hear from our wonderful panel. So we have Charlotte, we have James, and we have Andy, who are joining us here this evening, all of whom are seasoned pros, having done at least one campfire each, I think, but maybe two each. I'm not too sure. So we've got them to hear from this evening. So Charlotte, would you like to just...
Sure. Hi, I'm Charlotte Pace, and I'm very grateful that I've been asked to do this, because it will be lovely to talk about the RVN perspective. Yeah, I work in first opinion practice these days, but I qualified 23 years ago.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We're very grateful to have you here, and as I say, stepping in at the last minute as well. So thank you, James.
Thank you, and yeah, like Charlotte, very grateful to be here this evening. Not least because railways being underwater are conspiring against me today, so I apologise for any noises off while I'm speaking this evening. I'm actually, if any of you know Warrington Bank Quay really well, I'm sat in the bar of the Pattern Arms, halfway to Glasgow. So that's where I am. I'm here tonight as the president of VetLife, and really looking forward to the conversation about what we can do.
Excellent, lovely. Thank you, James. Andy.
Yes, hi everybody. So I'm Andy Green. I currently am people director at a large independent practice down in Kent, small animal. I spent 27 years as a clinical vet, first opinion, so I'm very familiar with many years of dark winters and the challenges arising from that. These days I focus on the people to make sure that our people are well cared for so that they can care for our patients to the best of their ability. So, and it's certainly a subject
Lovely.
I'm very
Well, thank you all very much.
about.
I think we've got some really good experience and life experience here as well. So I'm really excited for this. So let's get started. Our first question is self-care. What is it? Why is it important? And how can we help? So who would like to pick that one up and run with it and get us started with a concept?
I'm happy to kick in there if you like, Angharad. And thinking about this question beforehand, I went away and did a bit of Googling to find out what other people thought self-care was. And I thought this was a really lovely statement that I found. It said self-care is not self-indulgent, and nor is it being selfish. It means taking care of yourself so that you can be healthy, you can be well, and you can do your job, and you can help care for others and do all the things that you want and need to accomplish in a day. And I just thought that really kind of encapsulated for me some of the challenges that we see in professionals who are trained as problem solvers across all of our veterinary professions, and like to be able to kind of face a problem, find the solution to it, and move on. And actually, self-care is a little bit more challenging, isn't it? Because for me, what's embedded in that statement is saying this is something that really you've got to build in time for yourself. And we'll go on, I think, to talk about what we might do. But I think that the core message that I would sort of want to run through this is that we need to do the basics well. And I think a lot of us miss out on doing the basics well. The other thing that I uncovered, which I thought was fascinating, is how much self-care is being talked about. Looking at Google Trends, it suggested that people searching for self-care advice have quadrupled over the last 5 years. So I think, this is something that's becoming part of the lexicon, isn't it? And perhaps for people, of my age and older, and considerably less hair than I used to have, it's perhaps quite a new term, and I think it's perhaps a really important start point for us, isn't it, to explore, what do we mean by it, and what do we all understand by it? And I think perhaps that definition, therefore, of just doing whatever it is that makes you right and taking the time and the space to make you right isn't a bad start point. That's just
Love it. I think there's lots to explore in there. Charlotte,
Yeah,
do you
sure.
want to jump in?
I think it's really nice and really helpful to give a definition of what it means, because I think it's quite often seen, and maybe not by people who accuse you of it, but I think just by ourselves, that self-care is indulgent, it's self-indulgence. And and I think that I say we, sorry, I feel guilty sometimes by saying no, I need to do this for myself. So I think it's really important. But I think also that again, that James kind of hit it. What I was thinking is, is that old saying that you can't pour from an empty cup, and given that we are all in this, no matter whether you're a vet or a nurse or a receptionist or practice manager or whatever, we're in it basically for our patients, for our clients. And also for each other. And if we have nothing to give, then we're not helping the situation at all. So that to me is kind of my thoughts on it.
Andy.
I love panels like this because I learn so much just listening to the other panelists, and it's fabulous to be on with two people with such expanded worldviews and great viewpoints. I absolutely agree with all of that. I think I would probably add a couple of other things, which is I jotted a couple down actually whilst they were speaking, because they triggered ideas for me. Self-care is often bound up with self-worth, and it not being, as mentioned earlier by James, it's not selfish. Actually, again, it's the doormat / martyr complex sometimes is, no, we're a caring profession, we're caring professions, vets, nurses, the para professions, our support teams. We're there to care. That's what we do. It's why we get up in the morning. It's why we come to work, for almost all of us. And we're really, really good very often at caring for everybody else, and really, really bad at caring for ourselves, picking up the warning signs, going, no, and somebody says, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. When actually we're not waving, we're drowning. And so the honesty, particularly when we look ourselves in the mirror, to go, how am I doing today? And there are days when we feel like a superhero and we've got it all sorted, and you kind of crack in through the door of the surgery and it's like, give me anything, I'll handle everything. I can take everyone on my back. And other days where it's basically a gold medal performance to have got out of bed and put your slippers on because you just don't want to. And so being able to be honest with yourself and with the people that care about you within the practice as well as outside about how you're doing. It's not selfish. Actually, selfish is not actually acknowledging when you need some help, when you need to take some time. For me, the analogy that I use so often, and I'm going to use it again, is the oxygen masks analogy on a plane. Every time you get on a plane, same thing. What do they say about oxygen masks? Put your own mask on before you attempt to help anybody else. Why? Because otherwise you can't help anybody else because you're out on the floor. And this is the same thing, as Charlotte was saying there particularly. If we're empty, we've got nothing to give. So this is actually, it's fundamental that we practice self-care because it will allow us to be more, have more, do more, and give more.
I think we've had some really great sort of descriptions coming through here. James, you're about to jump in, but I just wanted to comment on the self-care, the selfishness, and just chuck in another word of self-compassion as well, and not judging yourself for needing to take that. And as you say, you've got to look after yourself, otherwise how can you do the other bits? James.
I know that one of the questions that's come into us before tonight is about burnout. And I just wonder whether, whilst we're in this kind of framing what we need to avoid, whether you're happy for me to sort of bring that in a little bit, because what I'd like to do, if it's okay to do so, is to share my story a little bit here, and I think it really speaks to what Andy has just said. You know, and I was asked by Sheep Pet Society to do an after-dinner speech on burnout. I thought that's not after-dinner speech material, but I'm going to pitch it in here. And you know, what I talked about was the sort of treadmill that we put ourselves on as veterinary professionals. And you know, I think right back to being at school and doing the GCSEs that I needed to do to get the A levels that I needed to do to get into college, to get the degree, to get the job, and then you follow that through, don't you? And actually, you know, as a farm animal clinician, one of my goals was to kind of have my own clients and to have people who really were dependent on my delivery of service to them, and that builds over time, doesn't it, to a point where actually you reach a position where you've decided in your own mind that actually, you know, you're the only person who can help that farm because you're the only person who understands it well enough, and therefore, you know, the phone is on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's a photo which I keep as a screensaver on my iPad now to remind me of the frailty of that position. And it's a photo of my children in the back garden throwing leaves in the air. Really banal photo, really. Throwing leaves in the air, just having a laugh. I was there to rake the leaves up on a Sunday afternoon. And then I got a call from a farmer who said, don't send me an assistant, I need you. I wasn't on duty, but I dropped everything and I went, and I missed the kids throwing the leaves in the air. And I went out and I did the carving or whatever it was, came back, and the farmer left a few weeks later. I can't remember, but that's irrelevant. But I missed that point. But I still convinced myself that I was essential. to the well-being and the management and the running of those farms, until a point where suddenly I couldn't actually do it any further. As Andy said, I put everyone else's oxygen mask on, and suddenly one Monday morning I wasn't there in the practice, and all of those farmers are still farming. And so my sort of take home from that is that actually one of the things that I think we can do as part of our self-care is recognize that we're completely replaceable. And actually, it sounds perhaps counterintuitive when we want to think that we're problem solvers and we're going to kind of win the world and we're the best veterinary surgeon since sliced bread and all the rest of it. But actually, we're completely replaceable. And I think that's quite a liberating feeling then to have when you're approaching your workplace. It's not to say be slapdash about your work, but it is to recognise that actually, we're part of a team, and the team is what provides that service, not the individual.
Yeah, Andy, I can see your hand going up there. Just jump in.
Yeah, just very briefly, because I'm sure Charlotte's got some really great insight on this. Off the back of James's thing, what's critical here is so many people, and I fully paid up member of this for many years of my life. I've had to work at this. Feel incredibly uncomfortable saying no to anything that involves work, like the farmer or anything like that. The phrase that really tipped it for me was one of my mentors said to me, if you never say no, what value does your yes have? We need to be able to say no, because there have to be lines. And as James rightly said, none of us are irreplaceable from a client perspective. They might not be happy that we're not there, but they move on. They'll see someone else and they'll get a great service. And it's, obviously we like to think we're indispensable, and the ego might take a little bit of a hit there when it turns out we're not. But for ourselves, it's incredibly beneficial. I completely agree with James there.
Yeah, and I think there's a sense of the trust as well within your team, that if you can see somebody else flourish with that client, with that farm, and see them build that trust in the wider team, then surely that's beneficial overall to the practice, that you've built in that extra step if you need it in the future. So yeah, I think that's a really great point, Andy. I like the concept of what is the value of your yes. That's a good takeaway. Charlotte, are you happy to share your part here?
Yeah, I am, and I think it is really interesting, because as both the guys have said, that it is difficult to say no, and it is difficult to put yourself, well, it's not even first, but actually valuing yourself, and you said about self-compassion, and it is all of that. And I just think it is, like, we love our jobs, we're passionate, we're part of a team, pretty much, well, most of us are part of a team, and we don't want to let anybody down. We don't want to to kind of burden other people, because everybody's got busy lives. Everybody's always got a backstory, and it is very hard. And I am currently just going through a recovery. One of our questions was about burnout and recovery, and I'm currently going through that now, where I basically burnt out. And and basically what I did, I think, is, at the time, to be honest, and and I'm going to be really honest here, but I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to do everything that I could. My drive to succeed, but to succeed for everybody that I worked with, everybody that I represented. And I felt, well, basically, I mean, I didn't even notice, and this is something that I have to work on, is that I didn't even notice I was getting to the end. And all I knew was, when I got there, then it just wasn't a nice place to be at all. And and the subsequent shame and stuff like that I've gone through since then. And I mean, it is difficult. It really is difficult to kind of think, well, yeah, now I'm doing things, I'm starting to do things that are actually helpful. rather than just surviving, you know. And I was working till like 1 or 2 in the morning most nights, thinking, you know, that I had to prove, I had to do, I had to, you know, if I wasn't doing it, I was letting somebody down. I didn't want to let anybody down. And it's something that Andy said right at the beginning, actually, about the martyr complex. I mean, it's a harsh term, but it is something that I have suffered from. You know, yeah, you know, it's not the first time that I've suffered through burnout. The first time was, again, it was a sort of building up into a to the, you know, the I am not indispensable, as James said. You know, I'm like, no, I definitely have a value and I have a place here. And, you know, basically ascribing my worth to something where, of course, somebody else can step in and do my job. But again, you know, as a, well, I've just qualified as a counsellor, actually, and you know, there's always a reason why. And the first time that I did this, basically, I was running away from the fact that my husband had died, and I didn't know what to do. And you know, we hear people that talk about things much more now. This was quite a few years ago, but you know, that coming home to an empty house, and you don't have to actually be widowed like I was so young. You know, it is that going home and, yeah, nobody switched the lights on. You know, you have to, or switching the heating on at this time of year. And, you know, it's so easy sometimes, not only just to fall into the martyr complex, but also to like that something's fixing you, that work is fixing you. When basically, I think I was, and I've done it again, much to my shame, really, that I've spread myself too thin, and then you can't cope. And yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult lesson to learn. And I wish, you know, from you know what Andy and James has said, I wish that I was able to actually, you know, have that forethought, that kind of sense of self-worth, a sense of self, to say, come on, you can't keep going like this. But yet here I am. You know, I'm years later, and I'm doing it again. And you know, I mean, we're talking about the whole self-care thing, but it's a dark place you can go to. It's a very dark place. And you know, I do try to talk openly about my mental health, because I know that for every person like me who's actually saying something out loud on a platform like this, there are dozens, hundreds of people who don't say anything because of whatever reason. You know, for me, it's shame, but for other people, it can be all manner of different things.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I think what you have said is getting right to the core of it, that there is always a reason why somebody feels the need to do that. And I was just wondering, I've got two questions here, one perhaps more for you and one more broadly. One around the role of the vet nurse, and whether, because you are the one in the practice who is sort of holding a lot of balls, a lot of tasks, a lot of things that are hinging on you, do you think that makes it more difficult for vet nurses to feel as though they can say no to things, and that they can safeguard themselves first before their patient, before the vet that they're working under? Do you think the VN piece is a very significant part in that?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And that's why, you know, when I was asked to do this panel, it's because of that I wanted to put the nurse voice across. So it's a great question. And yeah, it is. I think because we kind of, you know, we don't have like the final clinical decisions on things, but we are the glue that puts things together, and or helps hold things together. And you know, if we work well, and as nurses, if we're good in ourselves, then it makes a fantastic team that can be. But if there's a whole thing, you know, and I've seen it, I've witnessed it, where nurses who don't kind of be in that, then are perceived as difficult or awkward. And so it is really important for nurses to absolutely to say no, although, you know, again, it's a very difficult thing. I've taught in the past and teaching students to say no, you know, on a Schedule 3 delegation, no, I'm not comfortable. They feel like they're letting people down. But, you know, as Andy said, you know, actually, you know, what's the value of your yes? I absolutely agree with that. So yeah, I think it's a really important point for nurses, for sure.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and hopefully that gives some confidence to any of the vet nurses who are with us here this evening, that, you know, don't suffer just because you're the vet nurse in this. You are just as important as everybody else in the team. So my question more broadly, to build on this, is the confidence piece, the confidence in being able to say, no, not right now, I'm struggling, I need some help. Andy, James, have you got any thoughts on that, especially perhaps for our newer qualified members of the professions who might feel as though by saying no, they're not dependable, or they're not willing to advance their careers or take the tough stuff on? How do you balance that?
That's a great question. I think, as you know, Angharad, communication skills is one of my absolute favorite things to talk about and to teach. And one of the things I spend a lot of time focusing on is assertive communication. And in assertive communication, someone has the right to ask something and the other person has the right to say no with a valid reason, and both parties be okay with that. Again, as in the veterinary professions, typically we're crap at that. We're really uncomfortable. Somebody asks us to do something and we're helpful people. Well, yes, even though the answer should be no, because actually there's something else I'm doing right now I've got to do shortly that's going to be impacted by that, and it's not going to be a great outcome. So there tends to be a lot of avoidance and accommodation of those kind of awkward situations. And confidence is a habit. Confidence is a value. Confidence is an emotion. And the more we do something, the better we get at it. So it's again, there's a balance between not swinging so far to the other way that someone then says, oh, I should say no to everything. That's clearly ridiculous. But it's understanding where those lines are. And again, it's not just a no, it's a no and, or no because. It's a quality communication situation. But certainly for newer grads, and I remember myself, that there's a lot of discomfort around saying no to something. But actually, there's a level of respect engendered with the person that you're asking if that communication is handled well by the person who's saying no, and that there's a valid reason that's understood. And maybe, you know, can you speak to Mrs. Smith right now, because she's on the phone and she's urgent and important to me right now, from maybe client care reception. And for them, that is urgent and important. You've popped out of your consulting room for 3 minutes to grab at something and have a quick look at something, go to the loo maybe before you get into your next consults, and you've got 10 more people who are waiting on you. And if you answer that phone call, it's going to put another 10 people out of whack. And actually, when it turns out, you say, okay, what's the issue? Is it life-threatening? But she really demanded to know exactly how she should be applying her advocate. It's like, well, okay, that's not a priority for me right now. So there's the rearrangement of that, and then that assertive, I'd love to, I can't speak to her right now. If someone else can right now, that's lovely. That's actually not urgent. Reassure her it's not urgent, and somebody will call her back later, whoever it happens to be. We'll get her the information by the end of the day, or use the messaging app, or whatever it happens to be. That means you're actually, and that should be a good feeling, not a guilt feeling. But again, that takes practice. And as I say, confidence is an emotion, and we don't have emotions, we do emotions. If you want to feel confident, if you stand in a confident posture, you use confident vocal qualities, you use a confident tone, and you use confident language, and you don't and and sort of fidget around and everything, direct eye contact, standing firm, centered, you will feel more confident. It's an inevitable biochemical result of all of those things. So we can practice these things. And the best thing about it is other people don't know you're practicing. This is what I love about communication skills, is you can try these things on for size. What works for me, do it in front of a mirror. You don't all feel silly, but it makes you smile. It's the more you practice, the better you get. It's just that some of us are really good at practicing the things we should not be practicing, and we're getting really good at the negative stuff, if that makes sense. So practice makes permanent.
Oh, I like
We don't
that.
always consciously choose what we practice. So being conscious about what we're doing, really important. James.
I totally agree with that, Andy. Just an aside, I'm really worried that Neil has completely converted into a fox now, but I'm sure he'll be back at some point. But I think the only thing that I want to sort of pick up and add into what Charlotte and Andy have already said. Good to hear. Good to hear you. Good to hear you, Neil. You know, take as read that I agree with everything that's been said so far. But I think I was at a fascinating talk recently at some CPD, looking at the sort of potential tensions that exist when we talk about that sort of communication between members of different generations, and actually just different manners of communication. And it was a really beautifully presented piece that said, you know, boomers aren't all ignorant and millennials aren't all snowflakes, and you know, and this is why, and this is what's going on in the communication, which means that you've just perhaps got to reflect on how you have those conversations, and how you respond to what comes back to you as well. I thought that's a really sort of important point for us to take. And you know, I mean, if I could just draw on some vet life data at the moment, we know that the average person that we refer on from helpline for additional psychiatric support, the average person is under 30 but not a student. So I think we can see in that, you know, that we've got a cohort of, you know, young professionals, vets and nurses, who are perhaps finding some of those communications difficult that both Andy and Charlotte have beautifully described. So I think there's a role for all of us, isn't there, in thinking about how we have conversations and how we respond to no's. Because actually sometimes perhaps if we're of a generation where we're not used to hearing that, might be a challenge for us. But I think a really important learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the challenges with the multi-generational workforce, but also with the client base as well, because you know, you've got multi-generational client base with very different expectations. So trying to manage all of that, especially as somebody who's newly qualified or who's returned to the workforce, having that confidence and feeling that confidence is definitely going to be something where we can all support somebody to practice, you know, and offering perhaps to help people practice some of those skills as well. You know, tell me, how would you say no? You know, would that be something that would be helpful to people to do that? Because let's face it, none of us like saying no. I don't think, I'm gonna perhaps speak out of turn here, but I don't think it's an exclusively vetty thing. I think it's a human thing, and that all of us feel just that little bit uncomfortable going, oh, can't quite do that. So we could all support each other perhaps to think about our ways of communication and understanding how people want to take and receive that communication. So I guess we've sort of strayed a little bit into some of the solutions here. So let's just keep going down that route. Personal tips for supporting yourself. So being absolutely selfish here, because that is a good thing with self-care. What are your top tips? How are you facing the coming sort of dark, cold, wet, icy months ahead of us? And what things would you be happy to share with us? Charlotte, have you got anything in particular that you do to try and look after your well-being?
Yes. So one of my passions is walking, and as long as you've got the clothes or you don't mind getting wet, getting outside in just the hours of daylight that we do have and making the most of that is really helpful. And I have a very good friend who when I struggle, she's the one that always says, come on, let's go out, let's go walk. And you know, and we have a nice routine now where, you know, we've now got an aim that we're aiming for in the summer to do one of the British Heart Foundation walks in the summer. So, you know, there is that incentive to kind of get outside and actually move. And I know it's difficult. I've been in those times where it's difficult to do anything. where you don't want to go out, you know the things that you should do, because let's face it, all of us have got some pretty impressive qualifications here, so we're not, we know what we should be doing, but it's just difficult to do it sometimes. And so, on those days, it is allowing a pajama day, or for me personally, I do, and I'm showing my absolute sadness here, but I do like doing a jigsaw. Do like doing a jigsaw. It's actually like a real mindful thing. I listen to podcasts. I love sort of history and politics podcasts. It's completely away from the veterinary world, and yeah, and those are my thing. And yoga, I do like yoga, and I have a class that I go to, and also I do some stuff online as well. So those are the things that I try to do for myself.
That sounds like a really good suite of options there. And thinking about some of our members of the professions who perhaps might be struggling with chronic illness or disability, for those who are neurodivergent and struggle with the transition piece, I think there's some really good ideas in there. I'm a big fan of a jigsaw puzzle myself, and Andy, I think you've shared some tips with me previously when I was trying to get back into running, of just put your trainers by the door and put them on. You don't have to leave the house, you can just put them on, and it's just breaking it down into something that is achievable, even if you don't leave the house. But by the time you've got them on, you feel like a bit of a wally not going out of the house, so you might as well go to the end of the street and back. So that is one that you've given me for free previously, Andy. Have you got any other gems?
Yes, and thanks for remembering that one. Excuse me. And I unashamedly stole that from Ron Hill, who's a legendary runner, famously ran every day for, I think it was 35 years straight. And part of the reason he managed that, and he was a Olympic standard runner in his time, but part of the reason he managed that is that he said he set himself a really low bar. So all he had to do every morning was put his stuff on. If he didn't feel like going out, just put your stuff on. If you still don't feel like going out, well, I'll just go 5 minutes. And as soon as you've been out and gone 5 minutes, then you're good. But don't set yourself up to fail by giving yourself too massive a target every day. Oh, I have to do, this massive thing every day. It's like, no, make it super simple. I think for me, the thing that I've picked up and has worked best for me for many years has been, how you start your day is how you finish your day. So for most of us, unless you've got really young children, the first half an hour to an hour, I know you're in that camp, Angharad, but the first 30 to 60 minutes of your day is probably the only bit of your day you've got full control over. Because once you step out the front door, we're at the mercy of the traffic and the weather and whatever's coming into work and all the demands on our time and that glorious plan for the day and what we're going to do in the evening moment. It's survive everything else. But before we leave the house, that's totally in our control. And that 30 minutes to thrive, that hour of power first thing in the morning, is fundamental. So get up and move. Practice gratitude. Set your day up for success by, again, you don't have to smash out 4,000 press-ups. Do something. Get up and move. Whether it's yoga is fantastic, a little bit of stretching, that mindfulness, breathing as well. Most people don't breathe properly, which might sound ridiculous, but actually most people are sort of chest breathers. If you take a deep breath, the shoulders go up around the ears and down again. They don't diaphragmic breathe and fill the bottom third of the lungs properly. So actually just practicing, there are some really simple breathing techniques that you can find on YouTube, Facebook, anything like that. Super simple. They're profoundly effective at reducing stress and anxiety, promoting feeling of well-being, and actually makes you feel lightheaded the first time because your brain's not used to that much oxygen. But that's really important. I think the other thing for me is I have a routine of practicing what's called up spiral thinking and setting up your day for success as I'm driving to work. So I will literally set my day up in terms of saying, well, what if I have a great day today? What if everything I need to know and communicate comes to me easily and effortlessly? What if the team are on a great day today? What if all my clients really appreciate and respect the information I have to give them, and we work well together? What if my patients are really cooperative? What if I get lunch today? What a concept. What if I have more than enough time to do everything I need to do and leave the building on time? And just stack the positives on that. And it's amazing how much better you feel just doing that, walking out the door. There are a couple of other things I would say. One of them is the high five habit, which is fabulous. So it's literally, it's just in the morning when you get up and you go in the bathroom, you look in the mirror, you give yourself a high five in the mirror. Make physical contact with the mirror. Sounds ridiculous. The science behind it is quite fascinating and really impressive in terms of the positive effect that has on a consistent basis. So highly recommend that. And the other one is the 5-second rule, is because procrastination is also the thief of joy. So if you're thinking you need to do something, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, do it.
Love it. I think that's a really good one. I watched I can't think who it was. I think it might have been a Breno Brown sort of session interviewing somebody who was very much talking about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That sometimes it's fear that stops you from doing it. So don't count up to it, count down to it, and just give it a go and see what happens. Lots of great tips there. Not quite sure I'll do the high five thing immediately. I might have to build my my courage to do that, and equally I'm quite short and the mirror is quite high, so I'm not too sure who I'll be high-fiving, but there we go. That's a good one for everybody perhaps to try. James, I'm wondering if you might be able to help contextualize this for those people who are really geographically isolated. So thinking about a lot of our ambulatory vets and practice staff who perhaps don't have the option of going to do something sociable with other people, that it's all very much self-driven. And if you've been out all night on a really tough job, you know, how do you get the willpower to go off and do something?
Yeah, really fair question. And I mean, I think where I would go with that would be very much in a similar direction, I think, to what Andy has just taken us, which would be finding the small wins. And I think winter for me is a time where somehow activities feel more, and whether that's an impact of the cold. We talk about the cold as a way of helping people to snap out of adrenaline and cortisol driven emotions. We use cold quite frequently in that. So whether it is being driven by the cold, I'm not sure. But I think the winter time is easier to be mindful with your activities. And if I drew on some of those that can be done by yourself and at a moment's notice, really, for me it would be getting down to the river. And I love those mornings. My eyesight is changing at the moment. I'm not quite wearing glasses all the time yet, but my eyesight is changing. So I have a fascinating time of year when I'm rowing on the Trent and the riverbank looks like boats coming the other way, because it's so white and frosted and potentially covered in snow. And actually, I find it really easy to be mindful in that situation, to recognise the sound that you can hear, to recognise the just the feel of footfalls on frosty ground and on snow. But potentially, actually, it's an indoor activity as well, isn't it? And a lot of where I think we can go with this is by sort of setting what's the word I'm after? Ritual into what we do. So I'm a huge lover of music, and as much as I have apps on my phone that will play me a million different tracks at a moment's notice, just going and sitting quietly and choosing an LP and dusting it off and putting it on the record deck and sitting down in an armchair and listening to a side of an LP, might be 15-20 minutes of music, I think that can be incredibly powerful as an activity, just to sort of reset after a period of intense activity. So, maybe it's not music, maybe it is the jigsaw, maybe it's crochet, maybe it's going for a run, whatever it is, I would find something that you can enjoy every moment of and feel really engrossed in every moment of, as a reset. And, and potentially then, if you want to get a bit more social, I absolutely love going to the football in the winter, because you're togged up, sitting on the terraces, kids drinking Bovril, which I'm afraid I can't get into. But there's a tradition, again, there's a ritual to it, and there's a very kind of mindful accessing of that sport. And I think, Angharad, if you don't mind me just kind of extending this on to think about potentially some of the challenges that people might face in those situations around this time of year. I think the big one that I would point to would be what I describe as the enforced jollity of the Christmas period. And I would describe Kayleys in the same breath. And I realise that might be very unpopular with Neil and others online. But that idea that, you know, this is the time right now where you need to be jolly and you need to do this. And we expect this to be absolutely perfect, because don't you know how much preparation has gone into making this happen? It's desperately unhelpful, isn't it? So I think putting ourselves in an environment where we're surrounded by people, be they family, friends, colleagues, who can accept no's. We talked about how to say no to potentially to sort of work questions, but can accept no's from a social context just as happily as they accept yeses, and be really respectful and mindful of people's boundaries and the different ways that they might access sort of social communication as well. So I hope that wasn't too rambling an answer to your question, Angharad, but
No. I think that's a really great point, and especially I know I'm in that sort of slight panic of going, I've only got 2 days left before I finish, and I'm not going to get it all done, and how am I going to do it all? And you know, we've got a young one. Lots of other people are facing that sort of, how do I get to the nativity, to the carol concerts? I've got to make a costume. I've also got to do my day job and do all these other bits and pieces, and it can feel quite overwhelming, can't it? And on top of that, you've got to be smiley, happy, and wear a Christmas jumper to everything. And
I
that
think
can
you
be
could
quite
ask
a lot.
how overwhelming this is just at the moment. Actually, I'm seeing more and more faces appearing on Cat's screen. I'm loving it. Well done. Sorry, Angharad.
No, that's good. We welcome everybody to come and join us. I think the little ones definitely know. Charlotte,
can I just
in.
jump in there, because I think James has kind of hit on the thing about sort of this season, you know, this season and the enforced joviality. But I think also it can be quite isolating and quite lonely for people as well. I know that, again, you know, personally I've really experienced that. But you know, if you think about sort of the demographic of our younger nurses, I can't speak for vets, but you know, quite a few are single, or you know, have issues with family and things like that, that it can be a very lonely time as well. And you know, and I guess, you know, not all of us need to be patronized, but it is just an invite round for a cup of tea, you know, and you know, just so that we're thought of, those of, you know, those of us who are on our own.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and having the confidence to sort of ask people, what are they doing, and would they like to be involved in anything? And equally, I was chatting to somebody the other day who was saying it's just too stressful to be with family that they're not that close to. They don't want to be there. They'd really just love to get pizza or a Chinese, sit in bed, watch Netflix, and enjoy Christmas the way that they want to do it. Which comes back to the, you know, what will make you happy, and how can you seek out the people that will reinforce that contentedness rather than make it that much harder for you. So yeah, really good point, Charlotte, about making sure that you're connecting with people and seeing how. Andy, I see you nodding there. Have you got any thoughts on the connecting piece?
Yeah, I think that's so important. That yes, it's a bit like, oh no, everyone's got to go out on New Year's and be really ecstatic that there's a new year and make a load of resolutions and, you know, see in the new year. I love staying indoors for the new year. I love my wife and I like nothing more than snuggling up on the sofa and being in bed by about 11. That's a brilliant New Year's Eve for us, and we're very happy with that. I don't like the whole New Year's Eve forced jollity thing. Again, because it's other people dictating to you how you should feel at any given moment in time, which is, it's not helpful. And as Charlotte said, yeah, it can be very isolating this time of year. And for some people in particular, it's actually the most distressing and painful time of the year for so many different reasons. And so for others be, and for us to be compassionate and emotionally intelligent about where other people might be with that, and not judge and be judged for that, and particularly family. It's a great, again, one of my mentors used to say to me, love your family, choose your peer group. Because for some of us, the greatest joy in our lives is spending time with our family. For others, it's the most stressful time of the year, bar none, to feel like you're forced to coexist with people with whom you may or may not have much in common anymore, or there may be some values mismatches, and tread on eggshells is incredibly stressful. And I think having some clear parameters there, and okay, if there is that expectation of family time, well, again, what's your self-care for that? Well, maybe it is you're there for, you turn up in the morning, you leave in the evening, or you're there for half the day, or whatever it happens to be. Or this year, actually, I'm not doing that. Next year I will, but this year I'm doing something different. And about what is and isn't going to work for you. Because Christmas is going to happen whether we want it to or not. Same as winter. But the good news is that Christmas doesn't last forever, otherwise it'd be meaningless. Neither does winter. Doesn't matter how bad the winter is, spring always follows, just as the longest night is always followed by the day. It's hard to remember that sometimes, though, if you're not in a good place. And that's where having a support network as well, those close confidants that actually they're fine with you calling up and saying, do you know what, I feel crap today. Or you haven't phoned them and they phone you to say, what's going on, you okay? We don't need necessarily a massive network of thousands of people. It's just lovely, but it's who are our go-to people who will understand and support us, and we in turn can support them, because it's a fundamental aspect of what makes us feel fully alive as human beings, is the ability, we need to feel like we're growing, we need to feel like we're contributing beyond ourselves. That's really key to helping us not get too inverted, too introverted, and too insular. Is what can I do for someone else? Again, in an appropriate way, not in an I'm empty, I've got nothing to give way, but it's where can I find some joy here? And being clear, being honest with yourself, because if you really don't want to be around other people, that's fine, as long as you're honest about it and you have an appropriate mechanism that you will use to fill yourself up.
Really good point. Somehow we've got 10 minutes left, and I'm a bit shocked that it's 10 to already. So I've got one question that I am going to ask, but now is the time. If you've got a particular question that you want to ask our panel, then pop it in the chat now, and we will get to that. But while you're thinking and typing, James, I've got a question for you. That if people are thinking that there might be somebody who does need a bit of a helpful check-in, and they're not too sure how to do it, they're a bit worried about saying the wrong thing or coming across a bit too smug, or look at me, I'm looking out for you type thing, what would your advice be to help somebody bridge that connection and help somebody feel part of this?
Yeah, thanks, Angharad. I think this is something that I've spoken on before, and I'm really I'm quite passionate about, is that kind of first communication that we have with somebody at the start of a day can become habitual and can become, will perhaps sometimes start a conversation with, all right, and make an assumption, therefore, that we're just moving on from that. So I think perhaps what I would suggest is that we start our day, we start our interaction with people with a more meaningful conversation. And Andy touched on this with with the people that you might choose to phone, the people you might choose to speak to, but the power of good morning, how are you doing today, can't be understated. And if what you get back doesn't actually satisfy, I think it's fine to go again. There's a threshold at which you'll become intrusive and at which you'll become potentially damaging to the person that you're speaking with. But I think that threshold is far more is far further down the line than just, go on, tell me a bit more.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to
And I
check
think,
in.
don't be afraid. And I think the key thing that, when we're talking to helpline volunteers, one of the key things that we say to them is, you're not going to implant feelings of despair, hopelessness, whatever, into people's minds just by asking them about it. You're not. Very different. If you go out on social media and start blasting stuff out across the entire metaverse, very different. But in a one-to-one conversation with people, you're not going to implant those feelings in them. So actually, you can afford to be a little bit clumsy. You'll be forgiven for being a little bit clumsy, because the huge majority of people recognise that what you're trying to do is to be caring. And I think, one of the things that we said we might talk about this evening was, what's physiologically going on and psychologically going on in people with seasonally affected disorder. And if I just bring that in, it's pretty basic stuff. And as veterinary professionals, we're probably well versed in it if we were thinking about other species. But if we thought about this in ourselves, if you're somebody who turns up at your workplace in the dark and leaves in the dark, that will knacker your circadian rhythms. It will also reduce increase your levels of melatonin. So you're going to feel drowsy, sleepy, potentially struggle to wake up in the morning, and it's going to reduce your levels of serotonin. So you're going to have less of the sort of feel-good stuff about. There's a genetic component to how much that impacts on people. And of course, it's also influenced by a whole host of other sort of socio-psychological factors that are going on around the individual. But that's the basis, really, of why we get these kind of winter blues. So it's perhaps the most important time, isn't it, to be thinking of asking those questions, and just not necessarily always being satisfied with, yeah, fine, can I tell you about this case? Perhaps just going a little bit further.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it, and hopefully all of us will feel encouraged to perhaps check in on somebody over the next couple of days or coming weeks. And equally, if somebody asks us how we're doing, perhaps to be a bit more than, yeah, fine, carry on.
Can I just finish? Yeah,
So,
sorry.
James, sorry, you got your hand up.
Before, but
yeah,
just finish on that. So I've started trying to kind of make a bit of a bit light out of this, but also to try and draw attention to it. That I've tried to get into a habit of people ask me how am I getting on. I'll give them a score out of 10, and I'll also kind of caveat it with, yeah, I'm an 8 at the moment, but if you'd have got me before breakfast, wow, I'd have been a 3. So be glad that you weren't there then, and actually just almost give them permission, I suppose, to recognise that that's a conversation we can have.
That's a really great way of helping somebody, being able to perhaps articulate or share. Love that. That's really great. I haven't had any questions come through on the chat. I don't know, Sam or Deb, have you had anything come through to you guys? Because if not, we have got some other questions, but I don't want to cut people off from having that opportunity.
I haven't, no.
No, nothing else. No, that's all right. Thank you. That's fine. If anybody does have any more questions, then do pop them in there. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and James has got a slight train that he needs to go catch. And by slight, I mean quite a big journey that he's going on. So so we will need to wrap up shortly. I guess final thoughts from everybody. Charlotte, have you got anything that you think is helpful, anything that inspires you, or anything that you would like to share as your sort of advice for people who might be finding it a bit difficult at the moment, or are worried about somebody finding it a bit difficult?
Yeah, thank you. I guess, I mean, I really like what James said about just taking that time to have that little bit more of a detailed conversation, because that minute and just asking, no, come on, how you really doing, is it just shows that somebody cares, that somebody's interested. It that can really make such a difference. So yeah, and and again, as Andy said, these things do pass, and so do feelings pass. And so I guess my thing would be to and as we were talking about the small wins, so it is going out for a walk and not getting drenched, or if you do get drenched, then it's the shower or the bath when you get home. It's just those small little things that can get us through, but also just showing a little bit of compassion and interest. It doesn't take much just to check in with somebody, because we never know what really is going on in somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely. And those wins can be something really as small as I don't know, I like a chocolate biscuit. That's my sort of win. And if that's all that happens in the day, then that's still a good thing. Thank you, Charlotte. Andy, what about you?
Final thought, I love listening to Charlotte and James. That's been absolutely fascinating, and I've been taking notes on Post-its, and our desk has got Post-it notes all over it now. It's really valuable. For me, I think the biggest thing here is, again, there's a concept called above and below the line thinking and behavior, which we could spend a whole day on, but in essence, it's we want to be the creator of our life, not the victim of our circumstance. And that often is predicated on habitual patterns of focus, meaning, and action. In other words, all the time we're constantly deciding, what are we focusing on? Then what does that mean? And on what are we going to do as a result? And it's unconscious, but we have habitual patterns of that. And if we find ourselves in a bit of a funk or in a downward spiral or worse, very often what's going on is we're focused on what we can't control, on what's missing in our lives, on what's wrong. And maybe we're dwelling a lot in the past and recalling things that weren't good in the past, or we're projecting forwards to the future and worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. So those are all things we can't control. But if we practice more focusing on what we already have, on what's right, what we can think of as a positive, if you like, as I say, on what we can control, as I say, what's right, what we already have, and right here, right now, grateful in the present moment, that mindfulness that's come up a lot today, that it's easier to cultivate that attitude of gratitude. It's a habit. And we'll all have the times when we're thinking the happy thoughts, and all the times when we're thinking, we're more challenged. What you can reflect on is, out of say a week or 10 days, which side of the scale do I tend to sit more on? And on that basis, it's practice. I said earlier, it's about habits. We create habits. What we do is habitual most of the time. So it's always possible to create a new habit, or an even better habit if we've got a good habit. Replace an unhelpful habit with a helpful habit. And it doesn't have to be big, but that focus on what we can control, as I say, what we can appreciate, what we can be grateful for, puts us in a better frame of mind to then think about, okay, and I'd like more of that. How am I going to do that? That's that creator mindset. And for me, that's really important. Easy to do when you're feeling great, much more challenging to do when you're not. And this is where a support network is helpful. So have a mentor, have a peer, have someone you trust that you can go to with this stuff, who will be your coach, who may need to challenge you sometimes, but believes in you to be an amazing human being, because you already are. It's just sometimes we forget that.
Love that. James, would you like 30 seconds? I'm conscious you've got a train
I'm fine for the train.
So.
I'd love to indulge me if you would in a final anecdote, and I appreciate we've gone past 8 o'clock, but I want to build on what Andy and Charlotte just said, and it's absolutely spot on. But I wonder whether in these kind of mindful moments that we've talked about, in these moments of upward spiraling that Andy's talked about, I wonder if we can all try and find our inner Mrs. Gremlin. And I'm going to talk to you about Mrs. Gremlin. Mrs. Gremlin, that's not her proper name. But she was a lovely old lady who lived on the Isle of Mull when I used to go and visit that as a kid. And we would go and see her every year. The reason she became known as Mrs. Gremlin is she had a son whose name was Gremlin. And she was every bit as eccentric as she would imagine somebody would be who named their child Gremlin. That's why we went to visit her. But we turned up one day, and we opened the car door, and her opening remark to us was, "Great news! I've solved the problem of ground elder." We said, "What is it?" She said, "I've learned to love it." And I just wonder, which of the bits of our day we can learn to love. And I'm not just being kind of, rose tinted spectacles there and thinking that actually, every challenge is an opportunity and all those sorts of things. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I think that we can find bits of every day that we can love like ground elder.
Lovely. I don't think there's anything more to say. I think that has given us everything that we need to get started. So a huge thank you to all three of you this evening. I cannot say enough how grateful we are for you for sharing your thoughts, your feelings, your experiences with everybody here this evening. I hope for everybody who's here listening live that you've found something to take away from this. It's perhaps maybe inspired you to think about something or to do something. There's so much ground to cover that it's impossible to recap, but I think perhaps have some confidence in yourself, have some confidence to explore what does make you happy, find something, whatever your ability might be, whether it's taking the LPs off the shelf, the jigsaw puzzles, going out for a 25-mile run, anywhere in between. Probably not a 25-mile run, that sounds a bit stressful right now, but maybe that's your thing. But find something, and take the time to reach out to somebody who might need it, or whether you need it yourself.
Can I make one last comment?
James.
I'm really grateful to Sam for putting the VetLife phone number in the chat. If anyone doesn't have that number in their phone, please put it in tonight, because one day you'll want to give that to somebody and you'll be an absolute hero for doing so. So please hit that.
Yes, absolutely. All of the resources are in there, and if you need more information on VetLife, Sam has also put the website in there as well as some other resources. So they are lovely people. James is one of them. We know lots of the other volunteers through MMI, and we can tell you that they are incredible people if you do need to reach out for some support. So do pick up that phone or share that phone number if you do need it. And I'm going to let you all go, and I'm sorry we have massively run over time. Poor chairing on my behalf, but it's been so inspirational to listen to you all. So thank you so much for sharing your time, your thoughts, and we will see you all in the new year. So whatever you decide to do something that makes you happy, and let us know how you get on with those top tips. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you all very much. We'll send the recording out when it's ready. Have a good evening, safe onward travel, James, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody else. Thanks. Take care. Bye bye.